the Soviet Union will be pleased to offer amnesty to your wayward vassal.
The Soviet Union? I thought you guys broke up.
Yes, that's what we wanted you to think.
Must crush capitalism.
Ukrainian troops are watching and waiting, saying they are preparing for a fight. ABC's Patrick Revel is on the ground in Kiev. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Eva, and thank you. Here in Ukraine, the uncertainty remains whether Vladimir Putin is still preparing to attack. But with the glimmer of hope for diplomacy in Geneva, Russia, though, is still sending more troops to the border.
This morning, Ukrainian soldiers are watching and waiting in the snowy trenches of eastern Ukraine. Just across the border, Russian forces conducting military exercises.
There's no sign of de-escalation here.
The high-stakes talks in Geneva between the US and Russia may have offered some hope, but they've not dispelled the fear of a Russian invasion.
If in fact they commit another incursion into Ukrainian territory, they're just going to set themselves up for even more isolation from the rest of the international community. This is not a country that has a whole lot of friends.
Russia is still demanding a guarantee from the US that Ukraine will never join NATO, but the US again ruling out that demand. And Russia rattling its sabre just before that meeting, holding a joint naval drill in the northern Indian Ocean with China and Iran. One of Ukraine's top commanders to the east, Lieutenant General Alexander Pavlyuk, says Ukraine estimates there are now 127,000 Russian troops massed near its border. He says his country needs more American weapons to deter Putin. The US is rushing more military aid to Ukraine. These photos overnight showing the first shipment of a new $200 million package landing in Kiev, which includes about £200,000 of lethal aid, including ammunition. The country's troops have been dug in among bomb-shattered buildings now for 8 years, facing off with Russian-controlled separatist rebels. Any invasion would come through here. ABC's Ian Pannell going into the trenches, gunshots ringing out in the distance.
We just heard a gunshot.
At the Ukrainian front line, they say all they can do is be ready. Only the Kremlin knows what comes next in this crisis.
Do you think there is a bigger chance that Russia will try to invade?
Basically, yeah. We think that there is a big chance of this.
Ukrainian officials here generally have said they are less convinced than the US that the threat of a major Russian attack is real, though they certainly believe the Kremlin is trying to destabilize and pressure the country. The question now, though, is what will Russia do next week when it receives these written responses from the US?
Is advising non-essential embassy staff and their families to leave the Ukraine amid fears of a looming Russian invasion. In a statement just in, the US Department of State said it has authorised a voluntary departure of US direct hire employees and ordered the departure of eligible family members from the embassy in Kiev due to the continued threat of Russian military action. It says all US citizens should also consider leaving the country. Russia has sent thousands of troops to its border with the Ukraine. Russian officials reject claims it is preparing to invade.
It's breaking news as the world watches whether Russia will indeed invade Ukraine. NATO sending more ships and fighter jets into Eastern Europe, putting extra forces on standby. The Biden administration ordering the families of American embassy staff and all U.S. citizens to leave Ukraine. White House correspondent Allison Harris following all of the developments for us this morning. Allison?
Good morning, Adrian. President Biden is putting pressure on Russian President Putin, trying to stop an invasion of Ukraine. Yesterday, Kiev received a shipment of military aid from the U.S., including ammunition for those frontline defenders. This morning, the State Department is telling some U.S. citizens in Ukraine to leave.
The uneasiness is amplifying as concerns grow that Russia will invade Ukraine, with 100,000 Russian troops already staging along the Ukrainian border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warning Sunday any incursion would trigger a strong, united response from the U.S. and its allies, echoing the president's promise to inflict economic pain in the event of an invasion last week.
It is going to be a disaster for Russia if they further invade Ukraine.
Blinken is just back from Geneva, where he met with the Russian foreign minister as the U.S. continues to engage in diplomacy with Moscow. But there are no breakthroughs.
Even as we're doing that, we're preparing, building up defenses, building up deterrence if Russia chooses the other path.
President Biden meeting with his national security team at Camp David over the weekend as the State Department orders family members of U.S. personnel at the embassy in Kiev to leave due to the threat of Russian military action. Non-essential embassy staff are also told that they can leave. The British government now accusing Russia of seeking to replace Ukraine's government with the pro-Moscow administration. Republican Senator Joni Ernst calling for the U.S. to sanction Russia now.
President Biden has said he won't send U.S. troops specifically to Ukraine, but that doesn't rule out the possibility of the president sending troops to help NATO allies that border Russia and Ukraine, something the president is said to be weighing and could have a decision on early this week.